All right, so we're starting. Welcome everyone again to the online talk series Behind the Scenes on empirical approaches to platform governance research. Today we have a guest, Rebecca Scharlach. Rebecca is a very final year PhD candidate at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She's working in the ERC-funded research project Digital Values. And in general, her research investigates the individual and societal implications of social media governance. And particularly, she's looking at principles and values in social media platform policies. Rebecca has published a paper on that in New Media and Society earlier this year with her colleagues from Jerusalem. And this will be also the basis for our conversation today. And with that, I hand over to you, Rebecca. We're happy to have you here.
Great. Thank you. Let me just share the slides. Thanks again for the invite. I want to give you a quick overview of who I am, even though Christian already said some things. So this talk is based on my work on platform values, and broadly speaking, my work as a media and communication scholar critically examines the intersections between platform governance and society. For the last 4 years, I've been working on my dissertation that's titled The Construction of Values by Social Media Platforms, which is part of the ERC-funded project Digital Values and led by Limo Schiffman, who's also in the audience today. In the next 25 to 30 minutes, I'll reflect on the methodological approach behind governing principles, articulating values and platform policies, which is co-authored with Blake Helena and Limo Schiffman. And I would like to start by answering the question, which some of you might have by deciding to join this talk. Why are values important for platform governance research? Values are a prominent point of public discourse. Think, for example, current ethical discussions about AI. They are also part of law and policy discourse, but the theoretical background is often drawn here by philosophy relating to Kant or Hegel. However, there's a gap in platform governance studies when it comes to the systematic study of the articulation of values. Moreover, it is also underrepresented in communications more broadly. There are rich accounts of studying particular values through ethnographical studies, but these studies are often focused on one side and not really applicable for comparative studies. Scholars across disciplines have flagged the importance of studying values and the relationship between values and social media platforms. But despite this disciplinary interest, platform values remain slippery objects of analysis due to their conceptual complexity and the diverse stakeholders involved. And in my PhD, I set up to address these absences by developing empirical and comparative methods to study platform values, which leads me to answering the next question: what are values? Values are broadly defined as notions about the desirable that guide judgment and behavior, and it's a concept with a long and cross-disciplinary history. Different traditions cluster around particular scales of value expression, which we term personal, cultural, and infrastructural in our theoretical conceptualization of platform values, which I will introduce a bit more in a second. The study of personal values has been conducted mainly within the field of psychology and typically refers to individuals' guiding beliefs about desirable conduct. Cultural values refer to collective ideas about desirable conduct, which tends to focus either on cross-national comparisons or organizational cultures. Infrastructural values refer to guiding beliefs about desirable conduct enacted through technological artifacts and systems, both intended and anticipated. Each level of value expression offers relevant insights for the study of social media platforms, but no single articulation of values offers a comprehensive view, prompting the need for an integrative model. And we address this gap by synthesizing cross-disciplinary research on values and present a framework for studying the construction of values on social media, which you can see here as a figure. Locating instances of value expression on two axes, the scale of communication, which is here, and from individual to users to global infrastructure, and the degree of explicitness from the most explicit to the invisible. Part of the setup is led by an earlier mentioned shift to move away from talking about values in abstract, what platforms should consider, to values in practice, which we approach by looking at expression of values on these levels. We define platform values as underlying principles expressed on and through social media platforms. In this paper, which is led by Blake Cullinan and also published in Communication Theory, we set up the theoretical foundation for studying platform values, which is useful for implementing the study into platform governance research, as applying this framework allows to identify the scale and explicitness of communication as persistent sources of friction. Different scales of communication can also constrict and contradict each other, and this model allows to identify these frictions. The case studies we tested in this project show that the construction of platform values is not a smooth, unified process. Platform values are contested with different actors and modalities expressing different ideas of the desirable. Our findings suggest a broader rule about the relationship between different scales of value expression. Scale correlates with power. Interactions between social media users and corporations are structurally constrained. For example, as we show in our analysis, while each Instagram user is free to express their thoughts about authenticity, the very existence of filters built into the platform constitutes a powerful force that shapes the aesthetic manifestation of authenticity. Accordingly, although platform values are not reducible to commitments built into infrastructure of social media, accounts which ignore the role of infrastructure are missing out on a foundational and extremely powerful component. So now let's take a look at how we set up a study on platform values with a focus on platform governance. In our paper, Governing Principles, Articulating Values in Social Media Platform Policies, we, as the title might already tell you, look at policy documents of social media platforms. I'm not going to go over the full picture of the findings today, as this talk is focusing on empirical challenges. Therefore, I will walk you through the methodological approach of the study. But if you have questions, I'm happy to talk about it later in the discussions. However, before I do this, I do want to give you a quick overview of the general setup of this study. In the study, we focus on platform policies that are catered towards users. More specifically, we look at and compare the US versions of the terms of service, community guidelines, and privacy policies of these 5 platforms: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. The terms of service is a legal agreement between user and service provider that lays out the rights and responsibilities of both parties, focusing on the ideal relationship between user and the platform. Privacy policies outline the ideal treatment of personal data, and community guidelines outline the ideal experience of platforms as a community, showing how people should express themselves and interact with others. As platforms navigate different audiences, purposes, and interests, platform policies can be understood as boundary objects that cater to different parties and interests. As a seminal concept from SDFs, boundary objects are defined as scientific objects which both inhabit several intersecting social worlds and satisfy the informational requirements of each of them. We argue that policy documents primarily function as a category of boundary objects that Starr and Griesmer call the ideal type. In other words, platform policies outline an ideal vision of the platform, user base, and even broader world transformed through platformization. This normative vision creates a script that users encounter and platforms promote. Now that I introduced the theoretical setup of how we treat policies, I will move on to the next step, which was data gathering. Well, platforms now offer archived versions of policies, and I would also be interested to know if these archives are fully available or if there are parts missing. This was not available at the time of our data gathering, which was already 3 years ago. And there are also other initiatives like the Platform Governance Archive. But since this was not available at our time, we scraped these policies manually and combined all text into a single document per platform, resulting in a data set that consists of 15 documents ranging from 1,400 words to 14,200 words, as you can see in this table, which led us to the actual question, how to find values in policies. So now that we have downloaded all documents, the main challenge was to answer where and how to find values in them. Our approach, in which we combined several approaches to provide a comprehensive account of the values foregrounded in platform policies, was twofold. First, we charted a bird's eye view of value terms through quantitative analysis of the words composing these documents. This analysis was instructive in identifying the main realms that platforms emphasize, yet limited in its ability to identify deeper discursive mechanisms and overarching principles. To this end, we conducted an independent qualitative analysis of the policies that strove to identify how platforms assign responsibility to various stakeholders and which values are used as governing principles to construct the ideal platform and user. Applying the earlier mentioned model to a focus on platform governance for the study of policies, we build on a specific value theory to look at values articulated in these documents. This theory is based on the sociological approach of Natalie Heinig's work, or as my advisor calls her, the founding mother of value theory, next to all the founding fathers. Here we build on the differentiation between three understandings of value. There's value's worth, or the significance we assign to something, for example, monetary terms. There's value's object, ideas, or things that are evaluated positively, and value as principle, which refers to underlying criteria that guide judgment. For example, I can value loyalty as an idea or object, but I also judge people favorably or negatively based on their adherence to this value. Based on this definition, we started by using WordStat to create a lemmatized list of all words in a corpus sorted by frequency. After lemmatization, several words were combined manually throughout this process, given their shared root. For example, respectful, respecting, respected, and what our lemmatization process didn't catch were often related to future and past tenses of words. And in the next step, we created a smaller corpus of words that appear at least 10 times in these documents, which are still 820 words. Unlike sentiment analysis, for example, there's no established lexical approach to identify values in texts. Therefore, we developed an approach to distinguish value words from other words. This process led us to apply the conceptualization of values as principles by Heinig. We went over the most popular words in the corpus and counted a word as a value if it could guide decisions or behavior, has positive associations, or could be applied to multiple contexts. We included words that could potentially guide behavior, such as loyalty, yet did not determine in advance whether the words were indeed used as guiding principles in documents. As such, we were overcounting at this stage in a conscious manner that was balanced later by our qualitative analysis. We followed the practices of consensual qualitative research to evaluate the applicability of the terms to our definitions. After going over the list with these rules in mind, we ended up with a list of 66 values, which went down to 48 after combining words and nouns. A list of 48 values is still a bit too long for the human mind to capture. And in order to make sense of this volume of values, we re-evaluated it to detect clusters or groups of words that relate to similar values. We excluded community and privacy at this stage because these are the names of the policies and often invoked to refer to them in these terms. And for this, we followed the grounded theory approach, and we evaluated the words comparatively against each other in light of existing value schemes. For example, the work from Kristen et al. Comes up with a list of 78 value classes based on 460 value terms of both English and German dictionaries. Shalom Schwartz works with 10 value terms. The categories we identified helped informing our analysis, but the categories they identified, helped informing our analysis, but our main focus was on the data itself. We moved back and forth from data to categories in a process of constant comparison and deliberation. During this process, we actually printed out all 66 values and cut them into little slips and started talking about them each on their own. We then grouped them into clusters or groups of similar values. And this was a process of multiple days and multiple meetings of Blake, Limor, and I just sitting on a table and talking about each value on their own. And this process led us to organize the value terms into 10 clusters: engagement, safety, power, agency, expression, improvement, effort, care, awareness, and responsibility. Now, this table is part of the paper, and I'm aware it's a bit hard to read, probably. So I made a little word tree. Still harder to read, 48 values, but these values are included within this list. And this list actually led us to think about absent values, which are democracy, transparency, and fairness. These public values, which are often invoked in the literature associated with platform rhetoric, are not increasingly compromised, but largely absent from the policy documents. None of these terms or their synonyms made the threshold of 10 appearances in the document. Transparency was invoked only 8 times and all related to transparency reports. Freedom came up 4 times, and democracy, accountability, neutrality, and equality did not appear at all. And I would like you to keep this in mind because I will come back to it later. Now that we have the full list, we also wanted to further understand what it means that these values are included. For this qualitative analysis, we uploaded all policy documents into MaxQDA, as you can see here in the background, and applied a grounded approach, building a coding scheme based on consensual qualitative research. This analysis focused on different types of actors that the policies address, which are the platform, general users, and business users. For each actor, we coded for desirable and undesirable behavior. And as a small example, this is a section from the Instagram community guidelines, and the sentences marked in blue. So we coded each sentence on its own for desirable and undesirable behavior. And the blue ones relate to users, in this case, desirable behavior of users, and the lilac one to platforms, and the highlighted words here are counted as value words. Now to the results. The qualitative content analysis revealed that platforms deploy a surprisingly consistent set of organizing logics or underlying normative justifications given for policy decisions. We identified 5 core values associated with these justifications: expression, community, safety, choice, and improvement. Well, Facebook and Instagram, which are owned by the same corporation, were closer to each other in the framing of some of these values. They did not differ dramatically from the other 3 platforms that we looked at. The division of responsibility for the execution of values was similar across platforms, with comparable roles assigned to users and platforms. Our analysis also revealed that They reflect systematic and likely enduring tensions between the economic and moral meanings of values for social media platforms. At least potentially, the 5 core values invoked in these policies are compatible with the public good. However, these values are placed within a commercial framework that allows these corporations to strategically reinterpret values to suit their own interests. Platforms further delimit or dilute the potential public impact of value commitments by strategically assigning and largely offloading responsibility for the enactment of said values onto users. For example, while platforms are responsible for creating a safe and conducive environment, the responsibility for the enactment of expression is mainly on the user, which the policies frame as someone who regularly shares content and interacts with others on social media. Yet users are also asked to restrict their expression to how others express themselves in a positive environment. Among the 5 governing principles, the only one that platforms take full responsibility for is improvement. The enactment of the remaining values requires the interaction and coordination of both users and platforms, with platforms providing tools that users are expected to utilize in specific ways. Hence, the ultimate responsibility for realizing the values of expression, community, safety, and choice lies with users, articulating a vision of platform governance that significantly depends on self-governance. Now, how can platform governance make use of this, or what can you preserve from this study? Future studies can also use this methodological approach to identify values expressed in policy documents and other setups, such as historical changes over time or in different national contexts. As I'm from Germany, I'm aware of various discourses related to platform regulation on national European level, and it would be interesting to set up a similar study in this context, and of course also in the non-Western context. But as I know from my work in digital values, where we compare values in 5 languages, sometimes a value has different meanings depending on the cultural context, which is also another point useful to reflect on. Our study shows a mismatch between public discourse and platforms' realization of it. We know that public values get promoted by platforms in different outputs, such as transparency reports, press releases, or financial disclosures. I guess one prime example is Zuckerberg's aim to create a better world or change the way we communicate through the metaverse, which I'm not sure if it still exists. Platforms discuss values and their governing principles through various discourses as part of corporate responsibility efforts of platforms. And in order to disentangle and compare the values articulated in this network of discourses, I think that qualitative methods would not just be beneficial, but is necessary for platform governance research. And the aspects that should be expanded from this approach. Platform governance should also be concerned about values in other modes, looking at how values can be expressed in other tools, such as design or speech, like comparing values between policies and governmental hearings. Talking about platform values always relates to questions of power, and as I show in my work, this also entails questions of responsibility. Mixed method approaches can help us identify the relationship to both. Who's in power and how this power is distributed, or who carries responsibility for the enactment of values a platform intends to promote. Lastly, connecting to what I said at the beginning, my work promotes the shift from talking about values in abstract to what values platforms actually promote. And this particular gap is also present in current discourses, such as ethical AI. What does it mean when we say we want platforms or AI systems to be fair, accountable, and diverse? How can and should platforms actualize these values? And how do they already promote them and bend them? And how should they promote them? In my follow-up work as part of my dissertation, I'm moving beyond policies to look at other parts of platform infrastructure, exploring values in design through affordances of social media features, such as the like, comment, and share features. In this collaboration with Blake Hartman, I'm developing a new methodological approach to study value affordances, which we define as perceived underlying principles promoted or hindered by technology. And as the last part of my PhD project, I will look at the construction of platform values through a social initiative of platforms. In this case, it's TikTok for Good by TikTok. In order to understand what values are promoted through these initiatives born out of corporate social responsibility. I think that studying platform values is challenging and can only be achieved through multiple angles and perspectives. And one of the challenges, but also strengths of platform governance is considering these multiple angles that we have to take when looking at such underlying principles. And exploring these principles that guide platforms also further allows us to understand the mechanisms behind them. And lastly, I aim to finish my dissertation by the end of the year and plan to work on vulnerable infrastructures and want to develop a mental health-centered platform governance approach, which also requires thinking of new methodological challenges for empirical approaches. So if anyone in the audience knows of a position in this area, please let me know. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm looking forward to the comments and questions. And this is a QR code for the paper if someone hasn't read it.